Next, I want to discuss the sexual tipping point model itself and how it helps optimize the treatment of sexual dysfunction in terms of taking a history. I know it's complicated, but keep in mind the red colors are always excitement, the blue is inhibition, and it refers to a list of relevant mental and physical factors, one on each side, where each may be inhibited or excited, and only key factors are listed because there's probably a million factors, many of which haven't even been discovered yet. So the mental factors listed are thoughts, emotions, relationships, culture, sexual script, the phenomenological experience the person has in receiving touch as opposed to the actual physical touch, and things that are unknown. You know, science is constantly progressing. We're getting more and more information about how all this works. And I wanted a model that would be both simple, like, hey, it's hot or not, and yet had the complexity to be able to incorporate new discoveries for decades to come. The physical factors are anatomical, drug and alcohol effects, endocrine, genetic and epigenetic, neurological, stimulation or actual touch, the physical touch, the friction, again, the unknowns, and previous medical or surgical treatment. Same thing on the mental side. I was tracking whether or not they'd been in some kind of therapy or not, whether or not that helped or it didn't help, because that's going to be a factor as well, obviously. And in this particular cartoon, I use sliders to demonstrate variability, but dimmer switches are also used, and they're essentially equivalent. So I know this sounds complicated, and I'm going to try and make it a little bit more simple so it's easier to understand. The STP is an easy way to depict both the mental and physical elements of sexual function and dysfunction that facilitate an integrated treatment approach. Now, why? Because sexual response is an endpoint representing the sum of every thought, behavior, emotion, culture, not just biology. Now, of course, this mind-body concept is older than Descartes, not just George Engel and his psychosocial model, biopsychosocial model. Now, the sexual tipping point is a threshold at which an individual experiences a sexual response at a given moment in time. So that's going to change. Well, if you think about yourself, you'll have sexual thoughts during the day, but there's all kinds of other stuff going on. So your genetics haven't changed, your biology hasn't changed, but how you're feeling is going to be shifting throughout the day, of course. So this is a model that can tell you, like, at a moment, what's going on and what's determining that. So the STP balance beam can illustrate all the intra and intra-individual variability characteristics. Now, these intra-individual variability is critical. You're on the subway, you're holding on to the pole, it's rocking back and forth, you close your eyes and you're remembering a pleasant sexual experience from the night before and your partner's touch. And you kind of have a little smile on your face. And then all of a sudden some creepy guy comes and presses against you and touches your hand. The exact same physical stimulation in this new context evokes a completely different response, yet you're anatomically haven't changed, your genetics haven't changed, nothing physical has changed. That's all in your mind. So there's always this integration going on that we have to be aware of. So there's differences between people, but there's differences between any given individual at any given moment in time. The balance beam can illustrate that. And in this cartoon, the biological or physical elements, with these like overweight guys at the counter, are obvious. But as is the health David would need for optimal functioning on the other side of the equation. So it's going to kind of go back and forth, and you're dialing this up or down depending on who it is you're speaking with. The multitude of factors that determine sexual responses are depicted as variable dimmer switches, as they're not binary on and off switches, but continuous, reflecting their endless variability. Each dimmer is like a microvariable switch that symbolizes a factor's varying polarity. Some are positive, some are negative, some are sort of neutral, and some are still unknown, and yet they have to be part of the picture. Magnitude is shown by the size of the dimmer, if you will, of the slider. The color shows the polarity. The net sum of all these factors determine the STP, and it's shown on the sexual balance beam, again, at any moment in time. It also illustrates with color changes a normal distribution curve. So if you look at the backboard of that balance beam, you see I've put on it a normal distribution curve. So, 2 standard deviations away, it's like red, they're excited, they're turned on. You can go 3, they're really turned on. But the opposite can also be true. And every one of those factors would begin to move that in one direction or another at a given moment. And again, the sliders and dimmers are interchangeable. It's just, Helen was an artist, but I'm pretty good at PowerPoint. So I made all these things using PowerPoint, and quite frankly, it takes a lot of time. Many of these factors are bidirectional. Excitatory and inhibitory processes can occur simultaneously, in fact. You can have both going on at the same time, and their balance determines the overall sexual response. So changes in polarity and magnitude can be bidirectional. For instance, mentally, a once desired touch, like we were just talking about on the subway, can become traumatizing after rape. Feeling great helps, illness inhibits. Despite that person having the exact same genetics they were born with. One day you're feeling great and you're having a sexual experience. Another day you just came down with COVID, you're feeling like you want to die. You're not going to be very interested in sex. But your physiology, in terms of your genetic predisposition, nothing has changed. So you need to be able to account for both. Drug effects, which many of you are obviously familiar with, can be bidirectional. Viagra can help excite. High blood pressure medications can inhibit. Obviously, many of you have experiences with antidepressants and their impact on orgasm, which tends to even be more profound for women than it is for men. And common objects can become fetishes, sort of like Mrs. Robinson's stockings in The Graduate. Now, that's a movie reference that dates me a little bit, but I'm sure you get the idea.